Hi, how you doing? Let's see. Oh my God, look at this.
You did good.
Little one.
Let's see how long she lasts.
Welcome back.
How are you?
Okay, good. Wow. Did you see this? Where's Amanda? Is she sleeping or is she coming? Good. We have Kumashim, right? I think we're okay. Hi. How are you? And your grandson, the senator? Well, he's not yet, but soon.
No.
Soon. He's on his way. Mazel tov. Pop, good morning. How you feeling? Is Pearl okay, by the way? I heard she fell down.
She's at her daughter's. She injured her kneecap very badly.
Oh, never.
So she can't walk.
Oy.
So she's there.
She's at the Coopermans, yeah? Okay.
How was your vacation?
I'll talk about it. It was really good.
That's good.
Yeah, it was really a very nice trip.
Good.
It was very, very interesting, very stimulating trip.
We have a rabbi coming up. Ethan, the 3-year-old.
Yeah, he's good?
Yesterday was 3 Sunday.
Okay. All right, good. Wow. This is nice. Wow, that's very nice. Very nice. Everything okay in the new place? You like it? Food's good? Bernie's not doing good, you know that. Bernie Otis, he's not... Okay, good morning. Come on in. Good morning. How you doing? Shabbat Shalom. You look very nice today. Shabbat Shalom. Hi. We good? Thank you. Dr. Bob, welcome to this side.
It's always a pleasure to see you in person.
It's wonderful to see you. You should look at the camera and wave so your friends know you're here.
Where's the microphone?
Right here.
No, but you should so they can pass them around.
We'll pass it around. It'll be fine.
Told Bart we would take care of it.
We're dealing with it. Yeah, this is the one.
Okay.
Yeah.
We need a half a dozen more.
The question might. Well, we got to put something in the ceiling. Yeah, but I don't know if you can do that. So I don't know if that works. All right. Good morning, everyone. Shabbat shalom. Welcome back. I don't know what year this is. I think it's year 2.5 of our study of the Torah. So we've been through the Torah 2.5 times. Well, for the Jewish people, it's 3,800, but 5779. Doing this is only about 2.5, 3 years. Yeah, no way. No, I've been doing this since I'm doing this since '93, but we're doing this anyway. Whatever. Anyway, welcome. It's wonderful to see all of you again. I can't even say hello, and you're arguing with me already. And Gelman's waiting. He's just waiting. He knows. Anyway, welcome. It's a delight to see all of you. Shabbat shalom. I hope it's been a pleasant summertime. It's the beginning of September, the beginning of the holiday season. A wonderful thing. We want to welcome baby Katz, who's with us for the very first time. What is her name? Riva. And Riva is how old?
She's 6 weeks tomorrow.
6 weeks, yeah. Still have the warranty. I mean, it's no kidding. Mazel tov. And we want to welcome the Hirsch family. Yeah? Emmett's here. My friend, my partner. Right? Welcome Rabbi Gelman back. It's wonderful. Rabbi Sherry's here. Wonderful. Rabbi Silverman is here. Good health. Look at this. You look terrific. It's wonderful. So all of you, thank you for coming. Shabbat shalom. So it's a joy to be together again. Couple of announcements. I'll tell you a little bit about my summer travels, and then we're going to study together. That's why we came together. This morning, of course, following our Torah study, we go next door for service. It's Rabbi Hoffman's daughter's bat mitzvah. Ariana Hoffman is a wonderful, flaming red hair, beautiful child, and it's her bat mitzvah this morning, so come join us for a celebration. It'll be very nice. And then following that, there's enchiladas, as in the tradition of our people. And then following that, there's Torah study. Where's Judy? There he is, Torah study in the youth lounge. Tonight begins the holiday season. Tonight is Selichot. The tradition is that on the Saturday night preceding Rosh Hashanah, communities and Ashkenazic communities gather at midnight to repent their sins. And because the holiday is on a Sunday night, you can't do it that Saturday night, so you back it up a week. So it's this Saturday night. It's tonight. Tonight we'll do it. 7 o'clock we'll gather for dessert. There's ice cream and it's eat milchiks. It's ice cream for dessert. At about 7:30 or so, we will change the Torah mantles from the colorful ones to the white ones. We make a ceremony out of this. We'll make Havdalah together. And then we're going to learn together for an hour. Professor Sarah Stein, the teacher at UCLA, teaches Jewish history and an expertise in Sephardic tradition, will be coming to teach us about the wonderful musical traditions of the Ottoman Jewish community. It's okay, Rebel, it's okay. I haven't even started yet, wait. And then at about 9 o'clock, we'll have a Slichot service, but this year it's going to be a little different. Every year it's a little different. But this year it is a Slichot service in the Sephardic tradition, led by Asher Levy, who is our musician in residence, and his sort of Sephardic orchestra. So we'll be doing the Sephardic versions of the prayers in Sephardic musical renditions. It should be a very, very beautiful service. The music is ethereal. It's just beautiful. So please come. So it's tonight, 7 o'clock dessert, 7:30 Torah mantles and Havdalah, 8 o'clock learning with Professor Stein, and 9 o'clock prayers, and we'll finish at around 10. And those who would like a traditional rendition of the Ashkenazic version of the Slichot prayers, at 10:30, Rabbi Farkas and Yossi Dresner will do that in this room. So please join us for tonight. On Wednesday night, Rabbi Mark Borowitz, who's my dear friend from Beit Tshuva, and I will do a learning session in preparation for the holidays on the theme of Tshuva and soul work. Next Friday, Shabbos, we have Shabbat together, and then next Sunday night is the beginning of Rosh Hashanah. If you're a member of EBS, you should be getting tickets in the mail any day now. They may have come already, and if your mailman has a hernia, it's our fault because the damn envelope is so thick. But there's a brochure which gives you all the holiday schedules. There's about 50 different events and services in this building. It's awesome because we have 6 different services at all different times and tickets. Please remember that you need a ticket to get into the building. The tickets are not, we never want to exclude anybody, but for purposes of security and for purposes of kind of controlling where people are, we hand out tickets. So if you're a member of the shul, you will get tickets. If you're not a member of the shul and would like to pray here, we would be delighted to have you. Just call the office and ask them. If you can afford to pay for them, we'll be glad to take your money, redeem your money to higher purposes. If you can't afford it for any reason, we'll give you tickets anyway, because we want everyone who wants to pray for the holiday to be here. So please just call the synagogue office and make sure you have tickets. You can't show up without a ticket. Okay, tell your friends you cannot show up without it. The only time you can show up without a ticket is on Yom Kippur afternoon. We do Yisker, and you're welcome to come then without a ticket. But otherwise, the guards will give you a hard time, only because we just have to be careful about who gets into the building. We have 600 or 700 children in the building for the holiday, and we have to be careful. And we have a lot of people here, and we don't want anybody to come in who doesn't belong here, who means harm to the community. So please just get a ticket and come. We'd love to have you here. Elaine.
If you have any tickets on will call, I've been told that you need identity.
Yeah, bring an ID card. Bring a driver's license, a passport, a $20 bill with your picture on it. They have a will call. There's a table with your name in it. If you forget your tickets and you're a member of the shul, you just give the officer there your name, and they'll look you up and let you in. I mean, we don't want to exclude anybody who belongs here, but we want to make sure that everyone who's here is someone who's come to pray and to learn and to be part of the community, and we'd love to have everyone who wants to do that. So please make sure. If you have kids and they want to come for one holiday or the other, just call the office. We can accommodate that. If you have friends who are moving from out of town or belong to another synagogue, we take care of everybody. So just call. But do me a favor, don't call an hour before Yontif. I'm not kidding. You'd be surprised how many calls we get an hour before the holiday saying, oh my God, is it tonight? I didn't realize it. Is there any way that, for $10,000? No, we will accommodate everybody, but please, it's more polite to call during the week and we'll take care of you, okay? And if you want to know, there's a schedule of which rabbi's in which room, but you can move around if you absolutely need to, and bring a pillow and sleep through the sermon of your choice. It's always very good. Okay, that's the holiday stuff. We have Rosh Hashanah, we'll have Shabbos Shuvah, so every Shabbat we'll be learning together. And then Yom Kippur is Tuesday night and Wednesday the following week, so bring your sins, bring some good ones this time, and we'll clean them for you, send you home sparkling white and ready to start the holiday. And then the following week we have Sukkot, which is a great joy in California. So please come and celebrate with us. Tashlich is on Tuesday afternoon at 4 o'clock at Lake Balboa. It's earlier because it's not, because there's no late service now, second day, and it's not Shabbos, so we're going to do it 4 o'clock Tuesday afternoon at Lake Balboa. And my dog, Theo, invites all of your dogs to come. All of his COLLIE-GUES, colleagues, to come. And we will celebrate a short bark mitzvah for all the dogs, according to the traditions of the Shulchan Aruch, right? And at the end, we will wish them all canine ohara. Okay? So please, please.
What has happened to you?
No, what happened is 10 years ago, we started doing Tashlich 10 years ago, and people brought their dogs. And people bring their kids and their dogs, right? So we decided to make it formal and do a little ceremony blessing the dogs. So we blessed the dog. We'd have Tashlich. And now we get almost as many dogs as Jews. It's a wonderful thing. And the dogs, I got to tell you, are a lot more reverent than the Jews. I mean, the dogs tell me how much they enjoyed the sermon, how much they love the davening. It's a
What's your favorite dog sin that you've heard?
Sorry, what?
Your favorite dog sin?
My dog sin? Oh, gosh, yes. There's a lot of those, yeah. Peed on the carpet. Chewed up the sermon, right? A lot of bad stuff. Yes, please. Sorry, what? Yeah, we don't believe in dogma here, right? Leave your dogma at home. Just bring your dog, right? How's that? So please come for Tashlich. It's Tuesday of Rosh Hashanah, and the park is beautiful. And it's Tuesday, so it'll be pretty empty. It'll just be us. And there's a big sign that says, "Don't feed the ducks." And we throw all this, bread in the water. And the rangers come by and say, "What are you doing?" And we say, "We're getting rid of our sins." He says, "Well, okay, don't feed the ducks. You have an hour to stop doing this." Okay, that's the announcements. Any other announcements? I think that's all the announcements. Everything else starts. School starts this week. And yes, please.
I just have one question.
I think UCLA's playing today, right? Yeah. SC's playing today?
I'm puzzled.
You're puzzled?
Yeah.
Yes, my son.
You said you started all this 2.5 years ago. Everybody said, what? And you said you started in 1993. So I don't really know what you mean.
Don't worry about it. It's not important. It's not important. This summer, Nina and I were invited. There's an international movement called Limud, which are learning festivals that are held all over the world. The biggest one is in the UK. It's where it started. They've had them here in LA. They have them in New York, all over the world. So Nina and I were invited to Limud, South Africa. And South Africa is a national organization that does a Limud conference, a big adult education learning conference. There's one in Johannesburg, one in Durban, and one in Cape Town. And they invite a dozen international scholars to come and join them. So they invited a dozen people from Israel and America and other places to come and be part of Limud. And Nina and I were invited to come to Limud. So we flew. We actually stopped in Europe for a few days just to get used to the time difference. And we spent 2 weeks in South Africa, a few days in Johannesburg. We were on safari. I have pictures of elephants and giraffes, just amazing. And then Durban and then Cape Town, and got to enjoy the Jewish communities of that community. I've had a lot of friends from South Africa who've always said, "Ed, you've got to go," So I decided to go. It's just a wonderful, interesting community. If you ever have a chance to do this, it's one of the places in the world you should try to go. And if you can go like we did and meet the community, stay with the community, it's a very warm and loving Jewish community, very committed, very passionate, filled with ruach, wonderful Jewish community. But it's a Jewish community with a great deal of tension, because while apartheid was ended 25 years ago with the release of Nelson Mandela and the ascendancy of the African National Congress, apartheid as an economic fact and as a social fact still very much exists. There is a very small and growing black middle class, but most of the black people of the country, which is 41 million people, live in townships which are terribly poor, terribly, terribly, terribly poor, first world kind of poverty. And most of the white people live in very, very lovely, beautiful, at least the cities where we were, lovely, lovely neighborhoods. There are 49 million people, 8 million white people and 41 million black people. And the white people live a very, very comfortable life. They have a lot of servants and a lot of help. And they live a very first world, like we do, first world life, except that because the unemployment rate in the black community is 35 or 40%, the crime rate is astronomical. And so the white community lives behind big walls with barbed wire and guards everywhere. And you have to go through we were staying with a family and they gave us the keys to their home. If I'm not exaggerating, there were 4 keys. You go through a front gate, a next gate, a door, another door. Everything is locked, everything is closed, there's barbed wire everywhere. And this is how you live. And so the community, every place we went, couples would say to us, should we stay or should we go? Should we stay here in South Africa where life is so good, where our parents are, where we grew up? Or should we go to Canada or Australia or Israel or America? And there's a great deal of tension in that community about the instability that's coming. In the meantime, the Jewish community was instrumental, many members of the Jewish community were instrumental in helping end apartheid. So we met, for example, a man named Albie Sachs, who was the chief counsel for the ANC and was the guy that wrote the constitution of the country, Jewish guy, and then served on the Supreme Court and is a sort of liberal hero in South Africa. And he's urging the community to stay and fight for democracy. And on the other hand, there's those who say, listen, I want to fight for democracy, but how long can I raise my kids behind barbed wire? And this is the tension in the community. So about 30 years ago, there was a big exodus of families. There's another one now. We're sitting in an Orthodox synagogue 3 weeks ago, a B'nai Akiva, a liberal Orthodox synagogue, and a guy gets up for an aliyah, and the rabbi announces that this fellow and his wife and his kids are making aliyah. They're going to go live in Ra'anana, and they have a ceremony for him. Now, as a rabbi, I know that if a community has a ceremony for something, it means they do it a lot. And that morning, they did 3 of these. 3 couples were making aliyah. So I asked the gabbai, who was a guy sitting near me, I said, how many couples from your shul are leaving? And he said, it's not usually 3 a week, but it's probably close to 100 a year. And this is a small Orthodox shul in Cape Town, I mean, in a nice suburban neighborhood. So this is the tension that goes on. And then, of course, when you leave your parents behind. I mean, sometimes the parents go with, but many times, because the community has beautiful facilities for older people, homes for the aged. So what does it mean to move 10,000 miles away from your parents and your siblings and your friends? It's a very difficult tension that the Jewish community lives under. In the meantime, they run a beautiful Jewish community, beautiful schools, beautiful synagogues, wonderful sense of chevra, of closeness. Yes, please. And great kosher restaurants, by the way.
I'm curious, the sentiment of Israel being an apartheid state, and what was the mentality, the vibe you got being in South Africa?
Oh, first of all, they're ferociously pro-Israel. In our group of the 12, 15 international scholars were 2 guys whose job it is. One is Simon, who runs honestreporting.com, who's an organization that watches the media and tries to counsel international media to tell the truth about Israel. And the other was Jonathan Spears, an international expert on security, and does all the writing for Jane's and other places about Syria. And both of them, the community brought them because they wanted they wanted to hear those voices. People who know apartheid know what a lie that is. People who know what real apartheid looks like. Okay. On the other hand, so this is a curse that's now the community is very pro-Israel, very strong pro-Israel. And many of them are moving to Israel. There's a large, the synagogue was a very Zionist synagogue, so it had a connection with. Of course, they're moving to Ra'anana. Now, if you know Ra'anana is one of those very wonderful places in Israel where you can't speak Hebrew. You're better off speaking French, English, or Japanese. No, it's Japanese because there's so many sushi restaurants that are run by Japanese chefs that if you walk around speaking Japanese, people treat you much better. No, I was standing in line in the post office with a Japanese guy, and I struck up a conversation with him. And I said, what are you doing here? And he says, I work in the sushi restaurant over here. And he speaks English, obviously, but he says, they treat me, they're so nice here. He says, it's much nicer than in Japan, he said. All right, so it's a very interesting, the South African community. Meanwhile, the country's beautiful. And they have thousands and thousands and thousands of acres and square miles of these parks that they've turned into game reserves, so people like me could go see lions. And you're driving along, and the guide stops the car and says, "Pull your hands inside the car," and a cheetah walks by. So I have pictures of this, and you'll hear in the back of the picture Nina going, "Pull your hands in the car." She had this idea that Ed's going to get eaten, and what would she say to all of you, right? So anyway, Shabbat Shalom. It's nice to be back. Thank you for holding down the fort while I was away. We're on page 1140. 1140, the very end of the book of Devarim. Moshe is now 119 years old and about to finish his career in his life. Bnei Israel, the people of Israel, stand on the precipice of entering Eretz Canaan after 40 years in the desert. And we are a week and a half away from ending the Jewish year and beginning a new Jewish year. And that is not coincidence. The notion that the journey of the desert and the journey of our year are coming to a close, and we will turn a page and begin all over again. It's the way that the rabbis set up the Torah reading cycle. So you have to read with 2 minds at the same time. The rabbis ask us to think about that what Moses is saying to the people about the end of the journey is really a message to us as we finish a Jewish year and begin a new Jewish year. And here the question is going to be, What story do you tell about yourself? And you'll see there are two declarations. The commentary tells you this. We have two ritual declarations here. One for the ritual of first fruits and one for the ritual of the tithe in the third year. And the question is, what do these declarations say in the context? But more importantly, what do they say? What do they say to us as we're about to end a year and begin Rosh Hashanah? And the question is, what story do you want to tell? What story do you want to tell about yourself? The story you tell about yourself, the narrative that defines you, it's your identity, determines what kind of human being you're going to be. And the story that you choose to tell about yourself is not the accumulation of the facts. It is the drawing, the line you make between the points of the facts to create a picture. Because you could take one set of facts and make two very different drawings out of it. You can take a life which is filled with triumph and tragedy, success and failure, celebration and pain, and you can make one picture out of it, a picture of blessing and gratitude, or another picture out of it, a picture of despair and cynicism. And the question is, well, how does that change the way you are? How does that change the way you walk the world, the way that you behave? What difference does it make in the behaviors you make? The story I tell about myself is not really the story I tell about myself. I am my story. The story tells me. It describes me, and it defines me, and it constricts me under certain circumstances, or it empowers me. Ribala, come on in. It empowers me to be the kind of person I am. That's why, if you've ever had the experience of going to do some therapy, the experience, in certain circumstances, the experience of therapy is to reorder the story. Let me show you a different way to tell your story, because the story you're telling about yourself is constricting you. And if I can show you a different story, that will open up possibilities that you couldn't see before. So the question is going to be, what story do you tell about yourself? And you'll see this at the very beginning. There's almost a wink at the beginning of the Torah portion that you have to pay attention to, because it's quite remarkable. Ki v'haya ki tavo ha'aretz asher Adonai Elohecha noten lecha nachala v'yirishta. When you enter the land that the Lord your God is giving you as a heritage, and you possess it, and you settle in it, you'll take some of the first fruits that you harvest, that the Lord God is giving you, and you'll put it in a basket, and you'll go to the place, and you'll say to the priest in charge, this is what you're going to say. Now, think about this a second. You're on a vacation. Very rarely, maybe you're this kind of crazy person, that on a vacation you ask yourself, what am I going to tell my friends when I get home? I mean, when you're in the midst of an experience, experiencing that experience, you don't often stop and think, how am I going to choose to remember this experience? Does that make some sense? Yes. Right? How am I going to remember this experience? The only exception to this, by the way, is because I do a lot of weddings. I spend a lot of time at weddings. And sometimes there are these photographers, right? I love photographers, but some of you guys, some of these guys don't understand that they're not getting married that night. And they're so aggressive in trying to get pictures of the wedding that they ruin the wedding that they're trying to get the pictures of. And they want the wedding to be beautiful so they can get beautiful pictures, but their efforts to get beautiful pictures are making the wedding not so beautiful. Does that make some sense? Right? I mean, I literally saw once, I very rarely stop a wedding in the middle, but I literally saw once a photographer shove the mother of the bride aside. I swear to God, I can tell you whose wedding it is. They're still married, thank God. They have beautiful children. The photographer literally shoved with his elbow, because he's holding the camera, and bam, and he knocks this lady over in order to stand there and get the picture of the couple. And I just stopped. I didn't say a thing. I don't want to ruin I just stopped. And I looked at him like, what, like, but that's, you don't stop in the middle of the experience to try to order the narrative you're going to tell about the experience. You're too busy experiencing the experience. Does that make sense? So what does the Torah say? This is what Moses is telling them. When you get to the land and the journey's over, this is the story I want you to tell. So what is he really saying to him? He's really saying to them, I want you to think about what we're going to say about all this. I want you to consider what the narrative is going to be. Now, for a moment, before we get into that, what could they say? What is he afraid of? He's afraid of several alternative narratives, and that's why he gives them this one. Here's the story that he tells them. Hold up this basket of first fruits. I'm on verse 3. You go to the priest, and you say, I acknowledge this day before the Lord your God that I've entered the land that God swore to our fathers to assign us. The priest takes the basket, you set it down in front of the altar, and then you say, now you know this because it's the core of the Pesach Seder, right? My father was a fugitive Aramean. He went down to Egypt with meager numbers and sojourned there, became a great and populous nation. The Egyptians dealt harshly with us and oppressed us. They imposed heavy labor upon us. We cried to the Lord, the God of our fathers. The Lord heard our pleas, saw our plight, our misery and our oppression. The Lord freed us from Egypt with a mighty hand and outstretched arm, awesome power, signs and portents, wonders. He brought us to this place and gave us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. Wherefore I now bring the first fruits of the soil which you, O Lord, have given me. So don't turn the page. That's so good. Stay here a while. That's what you're supposed to say. What are you not going to say? What is he worried you're going to say? What would be the opposite of this? Yeah, say that again. Yes. You're going to come to the priest with this big basket of fruit, and what are you going to say? Look what I did. Look what I did. I came to a wasteland, and I cultivated it, and I planted it. And by the way, all that's true. I did come to a land that was uncultivated, and I didn't come to a land that was rough and raw. And I did cultivate it, and I did plant it, and I did water the land. And look what I grew, and I have created all of this. And this is the creation of my hands. And nobody helped me. Nobody helped me. This was me. Now, why is Moses afraid of that narrative? What's wrong with that narrative? By the way, the facts of that narrative are just as true as the facts of this narrative. It's just you have these points of fact and you draw a different picture. You've heard that narrative before. That's the great American myth of individualism, right? That's the American myth of the self-made man. This is mine. I did it with my own hands. Right? What's wrong with that? Why not that narrative? What's good about that narrative and what's wrong about that? There are things that are good about that narrative. There are things that are helpful about that narrative. Right? Farzan.
Disconnects you from the past, from your past.
Yeah, well, it creates an alternative past. It writes, it's a letter, it's an interpretation of your past. It is an interpretation of your past. It's just a very different interpretation of your past than the one that Moses gives them. What's its advantage and its disadvantage? Yeah, Michael.
Yeah, it ignores two things.
Yeah.
It ignores the communal nature of the act itself.
Okay.
That we are here and we are doing it, not just me. And secondly, that the land in which we entered, if you recall, was a land of milk and honey. We carried the grapes out.
Yeah.
They were there already.
Yeah.
We are now the inheritors of that.
Yeah.
We are not the progenitors of that.
Okay, so the first piece of it's very important, right? The self-made man. Wouldn't you love to meet the mother of a self-made man? What do you suppose the mother of a self-made man said? Yeah, you're self-made my tuchas, you know. I remember when you were in diapers, right? Self-made. Are any one of us self-made? Are any one of us self-educated, self-raised, self-nurtured? We are the product of a community. Every one of us. Right? I mean, one of the great, just as an example of this, one of the great philosophical puzzles, and Rabbi Gelman, who used to teach philosophy, will correct me if I'm wrong. So, I know. Well, let me first say it, then you can. So the Enlightenment begins with the great doubting of Montesquieu. And Montesquieu, who goes through this philosophical exercise, is saying, what can't I be sure of? And he says, I can't be sure of anything. So Descartes picks him up and says, I can't be sure of anything. My eyes may be lying to me. My ears may be lying to me. My imagination may be lying to me. I doubt everything. And then Descartes says, I doubt, therefore I am. Therefore I am. No, but I doubt. That's what it was. He starts with doubting, and because he's doubting, he's thinking. And cogito ergo sum. I doubt. I do. But he starts with the note with Montesquieu's doubt, and he says, "I think, therefore I am." Now, the one little thing that poor Descartes didn't notice was that he was cogito ergo sum. He was thinking in Latin. He didn't make up Latin. Latin is the product of 2,500 years of European civilization. The language I use, the grammatical structures, the vocabulary, the resonances of the words that I use are the product of the culture that I'm raised in. Even the world's most individualist man is himself the product of a culture that raised and shaped him. And the reason why that's important ethically is because if I imagine that I am self-made, I owe nobody nothing. I owe nobody nothing. But the moment that I admit the fact that I am the product of people who came before me, and then in fact, I'll be right with you, not just the product of the people who came before me, but I am the beneficiary of the sacrifices of those people. They made personal sacrifices so that I could be the person I am. Then I walk the world with a very different sense. A sense of gratitude, a sense of obligation, a sense of connection. That's what Moses, one of the things that Moses is worried about. And if I imagine that I created all of this, then I place myself as God above the world, and I can do what I want with it. I can abuse it in any way that I want. But if I understand, as you said, that I am the inheritor, not the creator, the progenitor of a prosperity that benefits me, right? Then I have an obligation to take care of it and pass it forward. It's a very different way of thinking about the self. Douglas.
You see it
And
in
then Emmett.
both rabbinic philosophy and Greek philosophy.
Okay.
That humility is an essential component of wisdom.
Yeah.
In the rabbinic tradition, it's who is wise, he who learns from every person.
Right.
In the Greek tradition, Socrates becomes the wisest Athenian because he knows what he doesn't know.
Yeah.
It's consistent in both, diametrically, different philosophies. That in order to do this and live your life, you need to be, understand the humility, which some people,
Right.
president generals, may not.
I'm not.
understand.
Oh no! Here you're going to schlep me into politics. Schlep me into politics again. There you go.
He's one of my favorite Republicans.
Socrates. Right. Right. So the question of humility, which means I'm not the greatest. I'm not the be-all and end-all of existence. I'm part of a larger perspective, part of a larger context of human.
It's a consistent lesson in the Torah.
It is a lesson in Torah because it is so tempting to say, look what I did. Look what I did, look what I know, look what I am. That's the temptation. And so that's one of the reasons why this is a scripted thing. I mean, you can imagine Moses saying, give gratitude. Right? He does elsewhere. Give gratitude. But he doesn't. He says, I'm going to script this. Why am I going to script this? Because I know what you want to say. And I'm not going to let you say it. Because I don't want you to fall into that egotism. Emmett,
I think I'm gonna-
welcome back. Good to have you here.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here. I got to play devil's advocate for a second.
Please,
I disagree.
well, just sit next to Gelman if you like. The devil has a lot of advocates in this room. I just wanted to point out. Go ahead, babe. Come on, my friend.
Self-made man isn't the thing that exists.
No.
I go to the store and buy wood.
Yeah.
And then I use it to build a house.
Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't make the wood, but I did make the house.
All right,
I made a novel using English.
I think that.
But I made the novel.
Hang on a second. You're right. There's a very famous joke about this. A very famous joke. A guy, plants a field and the preacher comes along and says, "Oh, look what God has given you in your field." And the farmer says, "Yeah, you should have seen it when God gave it to me." You're exactly right. That's why I said there are virtues to individualism. There are elements of that story which are very important. The principal element of that story, which I think is very important, is a different temptation. You could tell a different story. Here's the story you could tell. Everything I touch falls apart. Everything I try fails. Everything I dream of ends up as dreck. Nothing I do matters. Nothing I touch matters. It's the loss of agency. Your myth of agency, your myth of individualism is an answer to the loss of agency. And it's a loss of agency, and the loss of agency, this sense of nothing I do ever comes to anything, is also a big temptation, right? Because it's really hard to find a parking place in Westwood. I don't know if you know this. Right, there's a lot of people and a lot of big cars, and people don't know how to park, right? It's hard to do things in the world. It's hard to get things done. And it's easy to give up and surrender and say, the universe is against me. The universe will not let me accomplish anything. I don't have within me the capacity to do anything, and so I'm going to sit my tuchus down and do nothing. The myth of individualism that you just spoke about is an answer to that. It's an answer to surrender, which is also a big human problem. So you have problems on both ends of the spectrum. You have problems with the guy who thinks he's the creator of the universe, and you have problems with the guy who thinks he can do nothing in the universe. And the question is, what narratives do you choose which empower you to reshape your universe, but not to think that you're in it alone? Go ahead and finish.
I wouldn't say either of those, or even the God is giving me this stuff, I'm
Yeah.
the inheritor.
Yeah.
I would say all three of those are unproductive for actually affecting the world.
Ah.
And when I think of self-made man,
Wait, let's slow down. Let's absorb that. Slow down. We don't think as fast as you do. All three of those narratives have issues, right? But we have to look at them very carefully. They are productive in certain circumstances and unproductive in lots of other circumstances. All right, next point. Go ahead. Slow down. Speak slowly.
of self-made man,
Yeah.
I am not nearly egotistical enough
Yeah.
to think of myself.
Good, because your mother's sitting next to you, and she'd give you a Zetz, Epis, you know?
What does the mother of a self-made man say?
Yeah.
I don't think she says anything because I think she's either dead or in a mental hospital.
No. I've been in his bar mitzvah. I can tell you what she says. You know, I pushed and I pushed. You know.
The self-made man is the person who he has people to rely on, but he found them all himself.
Well, yes and no. Yeah, yes and no. Yes and no. Stephen, thank you, Evan. Stephen.
There are 2, 3 word phrases, I believe, that can encompass both.
Yeah.
One, in the preface, you could say, I am so blessed, look what I was able to do, or I was able to do all this thanks to God.
Yeah,
So-
thanks to God, thanks to my family, thanks to my community, thanks to the gifts that came. Yeah.
Blessed.
Right.
Because look what I have.
That's it. So would you accept that as a see, that's good. That's
And my parents and grandparents had the good sense to have me born in the United States, and
Right.
I chose it right, So I am blessed. I'm so blessed, or thanks to God.
Right.
I think encompasses all the self-made, and that's fine.
right. That's good. That's good. Yeah, Elaine. I'm going to come around. I've got lots of wonderful comments. Elaine, go ahead, please.
My thoughts keep going to 20th century Palestine, Israel.
Yeah.
And doing it themselves.
Yeah.
And I just, if you could just talk about that, because I get the putting God in and the community and all that.
Uh-huh.
The narrative is, as we hear it, is that look what the Israelis did to cultivate the land.
Yes, that's a very interesting case. That's a very interesting case. So the Israeli national, sorry? Well, that too. The Israeli national narrative, which is now encoded in wonderful songs, Anu banu arza livnotu lihibanot ba, right? We came to this land was a wasteland, we cleared the swamps, we cured the malaria, we cultivated the fields, we built this beautiful land. That's true. That's true, with a lot of help from people, Rothschild and American Jews and others. Part of the problem with that narrative is what Israel suffers with today, which is, but there were people living in that land already. There were people living in that land already. And when you came, you were not entirely sensitive to the fact that the land was not an empty land. It was occupied, not fully occupied, sure, but it was occupied by people. And you were not fully sensitive to what your, what your entrance to the land did to that population. And that becomes one of the issues, right? This is one, in the early Zionist movement, there was the great debates. Martin Buber was one of the great liberals, as it were, who kept saying, folks, there are Arabs living there. It's not, the statement of the Zionist movement was a land without people for a people without land. Yeah. And then Buber comes along and others came along and said, but there are people there. You can't. So while that narrative is very true, and what it did is something very important, and this goes back to Emmett's point, which is you had a people which had, because of diaspora, because of galut, had lost a sense of their own agency, had gained a sense that only God can redeem us, and only God can bring us back to our land, and only God can change the conditions of our existence. And Zionism was a rebellion against that traditional idea and said, no, we have to redeem ourselves. We have to redeem ourselves, and not only do we have to redeem ourselves, we can't depend upon European nation states to do it for us either. We have to go and redeem the land. That's the Zionist, and that was true. That's a true part of the myth. But there are parts of the myth, parts of the story that became pernicious later on. It's a very, very interesting case study in our own self-image as a people. In our own self-image as a people. It's the same as in America. We came to America and we pulled ourselves up by our bootstraps. Yeah, except City College of New York helped, right? There was a community of Americans prepared to welcome Jews to this country. Not all of them. There was a great deal of anti-Semitism. But the fact that America was here and it had a certain openness to immigrants and welcomed us in certain ways has to be taken into consideration. It wasn't simply all our own efforts. Yes, please.
I think when you look at the founding of the modern state of Israel,
yeah.
and the lack of God, if you will, in the Zionistic, the Sabra dream, has a lot to do with the fact that the people who came there
yeah.
were already injured. There were people who came from World War II, the people that came from the camps who lost their faith.
Yeah.
And said, they came from this area of God will provide, God will protect, and then God didn't, so we have to do it ourselves.
Yeah.
So I think some of that,
yes.
the loss of Egypt, the rebellion against that was, no, we are going to do this ourselves. And
yes.
This is why God has been missing.
That's very important. It was post-Holocaust, the post-Holocaust despair of the survivor community had a decisive impact. But I think, I don't disagree with you, I just want to add an idea, which is, I think you have to go back a generation. Remember, the generation of Aliyah Bet, of the beginning of the 20th century, David Ben-Gurion's people, were people who grew up in the traditional communities of Eastern Europe being taught that only God can redeem us. Right? Bimhera b'yameinu yavo v'yigalenu. Mashiach is going to come and get us, right? And only Mashiach can take us back to the land. And only God is an actor in history. And they looked at the depressed conditions, the vile, depressed conditions of Eastern European Jewry, and they said, number one, God's awfully slow in redeeming us, and we can't wait for that anymore. We can't wait for that anymore. We can't wait for God's redemption to come, because we're going to be destroyed as a people, if not physically, culturally. And besides, there was a deeper rebellion, if you read Max Nordau, for example, that if you give up all agency to God and you simply become a passive spectator to history, waiting for God to come redeem me, you lose an element of your own human dignity. When Bialik, Chaim Nachman Bialik, is sent by the Odessa Russian Zionist club to Kishinev in 1903 to report on the pogrom of Kishinev, very famous poem, Ira Shaka, the city of slaughter. He's offended by the fact that the men of Kishinev did not rise up to defend their wives and daughters and sisters. And he says something has broken in us, that galut, that diaspora has given us a passivity which is unnormal, which is unnatural, which is not normal, which is, it's ugly. It's an ugly passivity. So you're right. A lot of the atheism came from the post-Holocaust generation, but I think it began a generation earlier. It was a rebellion. It was a rebellion against that kind of passivity. But here's the crazy thing. You've been to Israel many times, so you know this, right? My kibbutz mother, who used to be his girlfriend, Batya Friedman, right? My parents started a kibbutz, and every time my brothers and I would go, we would stay with one family, took care of us, so Aaron and Batya, right? So my kibbutz mother, Batya Friedman, from Toronto, I think, right? Every Friday night, the whole kibbutz wears white, gathers in the Chadar Ochel for Shabbos, right? The kibbutz, this is a shomer kibbutz. This is an anti-religious kibbutz. Not just non-religious, but ferociously anti-religious kibbutz. And every Friday night, Batya lit Shabbos candles, covered her head with a shmata, like my mother did, and recited a blessing to the God she didn't believe in. And then asked God, that God who she didn't believe in, to bless her children, later her grandchildren. And as Batya and Aaron and I and the kids would walk from their tzrif, down to the Chadar Ochel, I would notice that there were Shabbos candles in all of the tzrifim, in all of the windows, especially the Vatikim, especially all of the kibbutz veterans, the old guys, the founders of the kibbutz. And in my tmimut, in my innocence, I would ask Aaron, who's my friend Aaron, why so many candles? What kind of non-religious people, what kind of communists are you? You know, praying to a capitalist God like this. And they would look at me and say, "What are you crazy? It's Shabbos." So and in Israel too, by the way, every survey of Israeli identity says yes. There's 15% of the country is Haredi, is Orthodox, Haredi or modern Orthodox, right? And 70% of the country is Chiloni. But everybody lights Shabbos candles. Everybody sits down to a Shabbos meal. There's all of this sort of religiosity that floats through Israeli narrative because you can't let go of it so quick. You're right.
The non-religious learning communities where they're learning Talmud.
That's a whole new thing now.
But it's interesting to me.
Right.
How are you learning Talmud and saying there's not God in it?
Because they want to recover the narratives. Because they realize that the secular self-made narrative that Elaine referenced before is limited. And you need something greater. You need something bigger. And nationalism isn't going to do it. Nationalism is a very powerful effect for a generation or two, but there's something else. You want higher ideals. So they're looking for a narrative which provides a sense of higher ideals. Because look, what happens to the son or the daughter of the guy who tells the self-made man narrative? What does that child work for if everything is dad? True. It's very difficult. Because what ideals are you going to strive for? What ideals do you inherit?
By definition, you can't achieve...
You can't achieve what that person achieved because you inherit it. Right? No, you see, it's a very interesting...
Look at Castle. He had all this stuff he got from his dad.
Yeah.
He said, I'm going to make all the stuff again.
Oh, that is such a great example, Em. Because William Randolph Hearst has got to go down in history as one of the great self-destructive men in our history.
I completely agree.
Right?
But he did have actual gold in the tiles by the pool, and I got to walk there.
Listen, the house.
Like a pharaoh.
I tried to buy that house for Valley Beth Shalom. I trade this campus for that house. We'd have a shul in San Simeon. We'd commute. I tried. Listen, you know.
You can be a terrible person. That doesn't make you not a self-made
I'm not saying no. Terrible person's a different kind of category. All right, let's get Tavo. Hang on. Let's get quick comments, and I want to get back to the text because we only got one line in the text.
Children of self-made men.
Yes.
What happens frequently is they get born on third base thinking they got there by hitting a triple.
Right.
They don't understand that it was given to them.
Yes, that's what happens. And then they act in certain ways that follow along because they have to prove themselves. And it's really hard to prove yourself to anyway.
Anyway,
Okay, I'm coming.
The psychologist Murray Bowen, who's the founder of psychodynamic theory, psychological theory, posited that dependence and independence are highly neurotic views.
Yeah.
It's interdependence that makes
Dependence and independence are both neurotic. It's interdependence that is the healthy way to live your life. That's a very nice idea. That's a very nice. Jerry.
Just a historical footnote, there's a little irony that we're accepting the
Yeah.
It is currently the American story.
Yeah.
But if you ask John Rockefeller, how was it that he cornered oil, he would give a Calvinist answer and say he was chosen, he was elected.
Right.
God did it.
Right.
And I think that narrative, which was very common in that era,
Yeah.
lost out with the dilution in many communities of religion.
Wow.
But probably still exists in those religions that we don't talk to people who believe in it.
Well, I don't know. I talk to people all the time. They tell me this stuff. So Jerry's point is that before you had, or actually before or underneath the self-made man myth is a fundamental Calvinist myth, which is that God chooses the winners and losers. And if I'm a winner, it's because God chose me. Because of God's grace. Not because of my righteousness, by the way, because of God's grace. And so Rockefeller understood that his good fortune was a gift from God. Right? Because he'd been chosen. But the opposite is that and those who are poor deserve it. Poverty is God's, and there's nothing you can do about it. Those social circumstances are frozen. They're not plastic. And therefore they can't be ameliorated. Somebody over here, yes, Judy.
So if we get back to the text.
Yeah, oh my God, the text, yes.
In that one paragraph,
Yeah.
it mentions God about 10 times.
Yes.
And so I think the message he's giving is exactly what we're talking about, of you're not doing it all yourself, that it's God who has given you that opportunity.
Right.
If you look at it, he keeps saying that.
Over and over again.
The message he's giving is
Right.
to look towards God as the giver and the blessings, as Steve said,
Right.
that we were given. And that's where it comes from. It's from a higher source.
The other thing, I want to point out one other thing that's interesting about this text, and Jonathan Sachs in this week's Torah portion comment mentions it as well. It's a reference to a wonderful historian named Yosef Yerushalmi, who taught at Columbia. Notice a guy shows up at the altar with a big basket of the first fruits of the land. And to what does he attribute the gifts of this moment? Not to nature, but to history. That the fundamental driving force in this culture is not the worship of nature, but the worship of history. Rabbi Schulweis once pointed out something that it just never occurred to me. It was so interesting. Rosh Hashanah morning, it's a week from Monday, we will read Torah. If you were just off the top of your head didn't know anything, what Torah reading should we read on Rosh Hashanah morning? Breshit. What do we read? The Abraham story. Why don't we read Breshit? Why don't we read Breshit? Because, and Schulweis's point and Joe Yerushalmi's point is because if you embrace nature as the fundamental metaphor for your existence, you look at the world in a certain way. If you embrace history as the fundamental metaphor, you look at the world in a different way. Now, what's the difference between nature and history? Nature is circular. Nature is completely circular. Day follows night, follows day, follows night. Winter, spring, summer, fall, winter, spring, summer, fall. Birth, growth, maturity, age, death, and rebirth. And rebirth. You have the great cycle of being. Civilizations which embraced nature embraced the idea that being is a circle. That being is a circle. And if being is a circle, and by the way, Joseph Campbell points out that the circle is the most popular religious symbol in world religions. Right? Buddhists have prayer wheels, and Native Americans build their villages in circles, and if you ever look at any of the iconography of Christian art, it's all halos, which are circles, and we do circular challahs, Circles are common. What does the circle promise? No such thing as death. There's no such thing as death. Death is only the prelude to rebirth. The risen God, okay? The phoenix that is burned up and rises from the ashes. Rebirth. Nature is about rebirth. And you could see first fruits. You could have imagined that the Bible would say, bring your first fruits because this is evidence that death doesn't exist and we always go on living. Death is only the prelude to the rebirth of life. Okay? Why did the biblical tradition reject that? That's such a powerful idea. Why did it reject it? Because there's rebirth for the species, but not for the individual. Because if I say that experience and human life is a circle, then I have to agree with Kohelet that there's nothing under the sun. That one generation comes, another goes, and nothing ever changes. If life is a giant circle, everything that's happening has been done before, if everything is a giant circle, it's the myth of the great Mandela, is what it's called. Not Mandela, but Mandela, right? Mandala, right? It's the great cycle of being, Nietzsche called it. The myth of the great return. Then there's nothing new under the sun. History will repeat itself endlessly. Generation after generation, we are fated by history. We are fated by the metaphysics of experience to repeat the same mistakes of the past generations. Nothing new under the sun. And if there's nothing new under the sun, then individuality doesn't exist. Then there's nothing that you and I can do that our parents didn't do and our grandparents didn't do and our great-grandparents didn't do. Right? I once taught in a Hebrew school in New York City when I was very young, and I sat at a table with a group of veteran teachers. These women who had been teaching since Moses. And I was this excited young man. And the principal said to me, excited young man, what are you going to do in your classroom this year? And I had this great idea for how to teach something. And two of the ladies looked at each other and said, we did that 3 years ago. It didn't work. We did that 14 years ago. It didn't work. We tried it. Here, if you want it, I have it, but it won't work. I mean, this idea that whatever you try has been done and it's failed, and there's no sense in trying, so sit down and resign yourself, which is ultimately what Kohelet says. Go enjoy the world with the woman you love, eat your bread with joy, and cover your head with oil and wear new clothes, because there's nothing you can do to change anything. I'll be right with you. When you change the metaphor from circle to line with a beginning and an end, with an origin and a destination. After all, the great metaphor of the Torah is the journey from Egypt to Canaan, from the house of bondage to the promised land. When you think of history not as a circle but as a line, you have to introduce the tragedy of death, but you also introduce the possibility of novelty. You can do something that's never been done before. In fact, you must, because your job is to move us along the line from Egypt to Canaan, from the house of bondage to the promised land. I'm not stuck in the patterns of my personality. I can do tshuva. I can go back and do it again, and this time do it right. I'm not stuck. I'm not rooted. I'm not rutted in the patterns of personality and sin that are going to keep me forever destroying myself and destroying my world. The notion of history, which is the notion that the Bible introduced to world consciousness, to think of experience as a line or as a spiral, but not as a circle, introduces novelty, introduces inventiveness, creativity, possibility, and it introduces the individual. There can be a Moses. There can be a Moses, because what Moses did, his father didn't do. Because what Moses did, his grandfather didn't do. And there can be a you, because what your fathers did, you didn't do. You doing something different. That's why the metaphor, when the guy brings the fruit, you think he's going to say, I thank nature for the gifts of the land. He doesn't say that. He says, I am the product of a history that brought me to this place. You see the difference? All right, yes, please.
Now I'm not sure I want to say it.
Go ahead. Jump in.
I was going to envision the circle as a sphere.
A spear. That's a little dangerous. What do you mean a spear?
Well, you don't necessarily have to go exactly on the same path, but you can go around in different ways.
Yeah.
Curve around and explore.
Oh, a sphere. Oh, I like to think of it as a spiral, but there's a lot of backtracking in this, because you're going to go backwards and you're going to end up making dumb mistakes and moving us forward and backwards, but it's not a circle. See, in a certain way, a circle is the most despairing thing, because what does it say? It says there's nothing you can do about it. We are fated to do the same damn mistakes our ancestors did. And that's terribly depressing. It erases death, it's true, but it also erases any possibility of tikkun, of change. You see the difference?
Yeah. The thing is, that's two-dimensional thinking. I'm saying three-dimensional.
Right. All right, three-dimensional thinking is good. It's beyond me, but it's good. It's wonderful. Yes, Farzan. Yes, please.
In Bereshit, God, after he creates Adam, said, "Here I give you all the earth, all the seeds, all the birds, all the animals. Master it, work it."
Yeah.
So it is the partnership between both elements
Yes.
that creates the balance and moves you forward.
All right, so you're articulating a beautiful statement that was offered by a famous German philosopher, very constipated man named Immanuel Kant. And he said as follows: as a physical being in the world, you and I live in nature. You and I live in nature. As a physical being, we are subject to the forces of causation, which are immutable. Right? The forces of causation are immutable. You can't change them. But as a moral being, as a human being with a soul, you have the power to make a decision. And that decision is a free decision. And that decision changes everything in the world. So we live on both levels. So on Sukkot, and on Pesach and Shavuos, but Sukkot, we are going to celebrate both the natural moment of the harvest festival and the historical moment of the journey in the desert. On Pesach, we will celebrate the natural moment of the springtime, but the historical moment of the exodus from Egypt. On Shavuot, we're going to celebrate the natural moment of the early barley harvest, the first fruits, and the historical moment of Mount Sinai. We live on both levels as natural creatures caused by, gathered by nature, right? And at the same time, we live as moral creatures who have the power to make decisions and change the conditions of our existence. And we live under both circumstances. And if you ignore one or the other, you ignore a part of your being. You can't ignore your physical being because you're going to get hungry at 11:30, right? You can't ignore your physical being because you're a person in space. You're a made out of stuff, and we're subject to the causality of stuff. But you also can't ignore your moral capacity to decide. That's what Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is all about. What's Rosh Hashanah about? Turning. Shuva means to turn, change the direction of your life, change the direction of your sphere. That's the great power of this moment. This is the celebration. Why are you going to fast all day Yom Kippur? Because for one day you're going to pretend you aren't caused by nature. You're not subject to causation by nature. You're entirely soul, which can, Gesundheit, entirely soul, which can determine a different direction. See, if you have to sneeze, you have to sneeze. Because you're a physical creature in space, and that's what nature's determined. But you can say Gesundheit, which is a moral decision. You see? And share a cough drop. That's exactly what the tradition is trying to grasp here. All right, one more point, one more piece of Torah, and then we're going to finish. Turn to page 1142. Here's the second declaration of this morning. And we don't have any time to discuss this, so I'm just going to lay it on you and let you go home. Or go eat enchiladas. You have to bring every year a tithe. Right? I want you to hear this because I'm going to have to ask you for money on the high holidays, and I don't want you to get upset. This is part of my obligation as a creature of Torah. Right? You have to bring a tithe. The first, we can go back and read it, but earlier in the book, you have year 1 tithe and year 2 tithe. You gather up and you go to Jerusalem and you eat it in Jerusalem. Everybody get that? You take your taxes and you go to Jerusalem. And that'd be a great idea. Take your income taxes, go to Washington and have a festival. That is a great idea. That would run the country. I like that idea. Year 3 tithe, you eat at home. You don't eat it at home. Year 3 tithe, you keep it. You don't eat it. What you do is you take the tithe in year 3 and you share it with those who are needy in the community. When you look at page 1142, verse 12. When you have set aside in full the 10th part in the 3rd year. So year 1, you take the tithe, go to Jerusalem. Year 2, take the tithe, go to Jerusalem. It supports Jerusalem. It's the sacrifices you offer in the temple. In the 3rd year, you give it to the Levite, the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow in your community. You protect the needy and vulnerable in your community, that they may eat their fill in your settlements. And when you do that, you make a declaration. So we had a declaration with the first fruits. Here's the declaration to the 3rd tithe. And I want you to use your imagination about what this is really about. Okay? And the Hebrew is much better than the English. So let's look at the Hebrew rather than the English, because the English is a little stiff. Ve'amarta lifnei Adonai Elohecha. So you're going to give the tithe to the Levite, the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. But you're going to say something to God. Ve'amarta, you're going to say to God, it says, Biarti hekdesh midbayit. I have taken out, biarti means to burn, but it really means to give away. I have let go of the hekdesh, of that which is sacred, my sacred obligation to the community. I have let go of it, minabayit, from my house. I've given it away. V'gam natativ, and I gave it, l'levi, l'ger, li'atom, la'almanah, I gave it to the widow, the stranger, the orphan, and the Levite, who doesn't own any land. Kechol mitzvotecha, as you had taught me. Asher tzivitani, as you commanded me. And it's in first person singular. Asher tzivitani, as you commanded me. Lo avarti b'mitzvotecha, I did not violate this commandment. V'lo shachachti, and I didn't forget to do it. Either on purpose or forgetting to. I didn't forget. I didn't neglect it. Lo achalti ba'oni. It's a really interesting phrase. I didn't eat it in my misery. Okay, it's translated as mourning, but that's not, oni means misery. In other words, if I had a bad year, I didn't forget to give to the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. If I'm miserable, if I'm depressed, I didn't sit down and eat the produce I wasn't allowed to eat. Even if I had a bad year, I still paid my obligation to the poor of the community. I didn't let my own circumstances violate my status as a giver to the community. I couldn't give as much as I usually give. I couldn't give as much as I might want to give. But I didn't let my own circumstances violate my obligation to be a giver, because to be a giver defines me. And I don't want to lose that. Even if I don't have much, I don't want to lose the opportunity to be one who supports the community. Lo achalti be'oni. I didn't eat it. I didn't consume it myself out of my own self-pity. Right? Mimenu. Velo ba'arti mimenu b'tamei. I didn't eat it b'tmeut. I didn't eat it in impurity, with bad motives. Velo nata mimenu lamet. Now that's a really interesting one. Lo natati mimenu lamet. You read the commentary. It says, I didn't give it to the dead. I didn't make it an offering to my ancestors. It's gifts to the dead. But now, what could that really mean? Lo natati lamet. Lo natati lamet. Right? I didn't worship death. I didn't surround myself with a sense that all is lost. I didn't give up the best of me to this despair of death, to the despair of mortality. Shamati bekol Adonai Elohai. It's in first person singular, which is very weird in the Bible because you don't hear it very often. I listened, Shamati, I heard, Shema Yisrael. I listened to the voice of my God. Asiti kechol asher tzivitani, and I did what God commanded me. Hashkifa mimon kadshecha. Listen to me, God. Look down at me, God, from your holy place. Min hashamayim, from heaven. Ubarech et amcha et Yisrael ve'et adama asher natata lanu kasher nishba lavotenu eretz zavat chalav udvash. Look down from your holy place from heaven and bless whom? Amcha, your people, Yisrael, ve'et adama, and this earth. Bless this earth. Asher natata lanu, as you promised to give our ancestors.
What doesn't it say? It says don't bless. It doesn't say bless me.
It doesn't say bless me. It's first person singular until you get to the last line, and then he says, because I am a giver, God, I need you to be a giver. Because I define myself as one who has a sense of obligation to give and connection to give, I need you, God, to have the same sense of obligation. That's the way of the universe. It's a very interesting oath. It's a nice way to end the year and a nice way to begin the year. Right? I bring you what's best about me, God. Right? I'm going to learn to be a giver. Give us blessing. Let's have a good Shabbos. Take good care. Good Shabbos, everyone. It's good to have you back.
Yeah.
How are you doing, bro?
I'm doing really well.
Good.
That was a good sermon, but I disagree with it a lot.
I'm glad. I'm really glad.
Like, I honestly think